On the 20th cassette of this Bible study lecture series, Dr. Howard C. Estep, president of World Prophetic Ministry Incorporated, will teach 2 more lessons from the Old Testament book of Genesis. Let's join the Bible study audience in the beautiful King is Coming Auditorium at Colton, California, where Dr. Estep is now starting his message with Genesis chapter 42, verse 10.
Open your Bibles to the book of Genesis chapter 42. Our lesson goes through verses 10 through 38. We have a lesson outline for you. It's broken down into 7 sections to make it a little bit easier to comprehend, and especially for me to teach it. First point is the brothers answer Joseph. That's verses 10 through 11. 2, second time accused and their answer. Verses 12 through 13. 3, Joseph demands proof they are not spies. Demanding proof that his brothers are not spies. Verses 14 through 16. And 4, Joseph continues to deal with his brethren. Verses 17 through 24. 5, Joseph's brethren return to Canaan. They go back to Canaan where the famine is in progress. Verses 25 through 28. 6, the sons report to their father. Verses 29 through 35. And lastly, number 7, the sorrow of Jacob, the father. Verses 36 through 38. So we look at our first part. We have the brothers answer Joseph. Verses 10 through 12. Verse 10 says, and they said unto him. This is the brothers answering Joseph. They said unto him, nay, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. Because he had accused them in verse 9 of being spies, of coming down into Egypt, spying out the land, seeing the conditions of the country. And he accused them of being spies, and they said, no, we have only come down to buy food. We are servants. We are thy servants come down to buy food. Verse 11. We are all one man's sons. They're bringing out the point that they are of one family. We are all one man's sons. In other words, no man would expose 10 of his sons at once to the dangerous business of being spies. Nobody in his right mind would do that. They claim to be all of one family, not spies from different nations. And on these grounds, he tested them to get proof they were of all one family. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. So the brothers are answering Joseph because he's been gone some 20-some years now. He hasn't seen his brothers, his father. And basically, he doesn't know that his father is still living, so he's wondering. Because he's down in Egypt, he has become the prime minister. Egypt has had 7 years of plenty, and now they're in a time of great drought and dearth and famine, and people are coming from all over that part of the world who have learned that there's corn in Egypt. They're coming down to Egypt to buy corn. So Joseph is somewhat, he's feeling them out, trying to make sure. He wants to make sure, are these boys true? Are they honest? Are they telling me the truth? So we had the brothers' answer to Joseph in 10 through 11. Now the second time they're accused, and their answer is 12 through 13. And Joseph said unto them, nay, but to seek the nakedness of the land ye are come. You've come down here to see this great famine that has struck our country, our land. That's what you've come down here for. That's what he's saying there in the middle of verse 12. But to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. Verse 13, and they said. You'll notice every time they spoke, Joseph received more news from home. Because he's probing them gently, accusing them of being spies. And as they defend themselves, they give him some more news about his family up in Canaan. This is perhaps why he continued to question them. He now knew that both Benjamin and Jacob were alive. Notice what it says, verse 13. And they said, thy servants are 12 brethren, or 12 brothers. the sons of one man in the land of Canaan, and behold, the youngest is this day with our father. Our youngest brother is with our father. So now he's learned that his father evidently is still alive. And then they make a statement here in the end of verse 13, and one is not. So they're saying that one of the brothers is dead. As far as they know he's dead, one is not. Of course, they don't realize that they're talking to that one who is Joseph, the prime minister of Egypt. So they did make the statement that the father's alive, the old man's still living, and the youngest of the brothers is living, and they're all up in Canaan, where the famine is, and one of our brothers evidently died. They don't explain why. It's rather interesting. So there they are accused a second time, and they give an answer in 12 through 13. Now Joseph demands proof that they are not spies. You notice he keeps driving this nail home. He keeps pursuing this thing right down to the very nth degree in verses 14 through 16. And verse 14 says, and Joseph said unto them, that is it that I spake unto you, saying, ye are spies. He keeps hammering this thing home. Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. In other words, you say you aren't spies. I believe you are spies. We're going to prove this thing out and find out who is right. Verse 15, hereby ye shall be proved by the life of Pharaoh. Now this is a phrase that they used in ancient biblical times. It's more like taking an oath. Today we go on the witness stand, we raise our hand, and we swear by the Bible. Men who are taking public office usually lay their right hand on the Bible, and they promise to abide by the laws of the land, uphold the Constitution, etc., so forth, at least until they're sworn into office. But anyhow, hereby ye shall be proved by the life of Pharaoh. Ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. So he said, I'm going to try you out. We're going to find out if you're spies or not. I'm going to keep you here. And if you're not spies, it'll all prove out, it'll work out in the long run. But I want your youngest brother to come here. So he wants to see his youngest brother. He hadn't seen him. He's been gone 20-some years. He's homesick to see his family. So Joseph is working a scheme, and he has to do this kind of gently, or they'll recognize who he is. So he has to do this very sophisticated like, and so that they won't suspect anything. The middle of verse 15, by the life of Pharaoh, ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Now this implies that Joseph was not yet convinced about Benjamin and wanted proof that he was alive. Joseph wasn't fully convinced that they were telling him the truth. Joseph relented in this. Instead of keeping all but one, he kept only one as security for bringing Benjamin. So he's going to say, I want to see Benjamin. I want to see your youngest brother. And how's he going to arrange that? Verse 16 tells us, send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison. Now one of you is going to stay here, and the rest of you can go home, but you got to bring your youngest brother back to get this one out of prison that I'm keeping as a sort of a guarantee bond that you'll show up. So he's tying them up here. He's going to keep one of them, but they got to go back home, bring the youngest down here. It's rather interesting. The middle of verse 15, I want to read that one section just one more time. Except your youngest brother come hither. Benjamin. 16. Send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison that your words may be proved. In other words, if you're telling me the truth, you won't object. If you're not spies, you won't object to this. If you're sincere and you're truthful and honest, and This is up and above board. You won't object to this. One of you stay here in prison, and the rest of you go home, and then bring the younger brother back, that your words may be proved whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you're spies. He's saying, now if you don't want to do this, then you must be spies. If you don't want to play the game, if you don't want to comprehend what I'm talking about, if you don't want to cooperate and do what I'm proposing that you do, then evidently you're spies. And of course, when they left home, they told their father, they said, we're not going to run into any problems. We're just going down and get some corn. We'll come right back. They didn't realize that one of them was going to wind up in Egyptian jail, while the others went back to Canaan with corn and then had to bring the younger brother back. It's quite interesting. So Joseph demands proof that they're not spies in verses 14 through 16. Now Joseph continues to deal with his brethren in 17 through 24, beginning in verse 17. And he put them all together into ward 3 days. He took all of his brothers and he put them in custody for 3 days. It's quite interesting. And Joseph said unto them in verse 18, the third day, this do and live, for I fear God. This is what he's going to tell them to do. If you be true men, if you be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses. So Joseph is making demands upon his brethren here. He's going to let one of them be bound in prison. The others are going with food to their family up in Canaan. And they're going to have to bring the younger brother from Canaan down to Egypt. And it seems like he just keeps dragging this thing on, demanding, trying to make sure that these fellas are not spies. Now, whether Joseph really knew that these were his brethren, and whether he had all of the knowledge he wanted from them or not about his family, there's a question mark in the minds of some men who interpret this and read it. So we'll leave that little part up to you individually, so you'll have at least some part in the lesson. So verse 19 says, go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses. Verse 20, but bring your youngest brother unto me. Joseph was wanting to see his kinfolk. Bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. In other words, they promised to meet his demands. And that was a difficult decision for them to make, because there they are down in Egypt. And if you look at a map of Egypt and look at a map of Canaan, what is now Palestine, Israel, it's a long ways down through the desert and over the mountains to go down to Egypt. And it's a long trek back up to Canaan. They took corn back with them. But they got to go back and they got to break the news to the old father. They got to tell him, Dad, we ran into a problem down there. There's this fellow that's in charge of the storehouses in Egypt. He's got sort of a warped mind. He's got some of the most peculiar ideas. And he's imposing on us that we bring Benjamin down there. In fact, he's kept one of the boys down there as a sort of a bond guarantee that we'll come back. It's quite interesting. And this all goes back to the point that Joseph originally, as a young lad, had the dream, that his brothers would bow down in front of him, and they said, malarkey, hogwash, not us, ishkabibbo. We're not going to bow down in front of you. And they eventually sold him to the camel traders going down into Egypt. Now there he is standing in the palace of Pharaoh dishing out the corn. In fact, someone said to me the other night after the Bible class that he was probably the originator of the food stamps. Sure looks like that, doesn't it? Sure looks like that. And the latter part of verse 20 says, and they did so. Verse 21, and they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. Now they're actually having a wave of remorse sweep over them. They are remembering what happened in ages past and years past. We are very guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear him. We wouldn't listen to it. Therefore is this distress come upon us, because we sold our brother to the camel traders. That's why this has come upon us. We're having this bad luck. This streak of bad luck has come upon us because we didn't do our brother right. We got rid of our own flesh and blood. It's rather interesting. Verse 22. And Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child. Reuben was trying to stop his brothers from putting Joseph in the pit, the abandoned water well. And Reuben was responsible maybe for trying to give some pressure for them not to sell him. But Reuben couldn't handle all of the boys himself. But Reuben is reminding them now in verse 22. And Reuben spake, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. Verse 23, and they knew not that Joseph understood them. Joseph, no doubt, learned the answer to many questions concerning his case and who was the one most responsible. So there he is in disguise, incognito, prime minister of Egypt, second in command of the country. Only the king is more powerful than he. And here come this little band of tattered, disheveled, hungry-looking Jews that have come down from the north, coming to beg food. Oh, they had money, yes, but coming to buy food. And even in a famine, you know, even though you have money, in a sense, you're begging someone to sell it to you. Verse 23, as I read a moment ago, and they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. He's very clever, wasn't he? He could speak their language, but he had learned the Egyptian language, evidently. Very fluent in the Egyptian language. And so he's speaking in the Egyptian language, and he has an Egyptian interpreter. And this helps to cover up the whole scene. And this little bunch of Jews, they can't figure what's going on. He's saying, yeah. And the guy has to interpret for them. Very smart, very clever. Very clever. Verse 24, and he turned himself about from them and wept. Now I believe that Joseph had fully recognized that these are his brothers. These are the same boys that tried to throw me in the well, that did throw me in the well, the abandoned water well. These are the same boys that got me out of the well and took me out to the route of the camel caravan going down to Egypt and sold me. These are the same boys that took the skin of a young kid goat, and after they had slain the goat, they had dipped my coat into that blood. They took my coat back to my dad and said, look, Pop, we found this coat. Evidently, Joseph is dead. See, he's dealing with this group of boys, his brothers. And now this is really a traumatic experience has come to him. Here he is standing face to face with these boys, his brothers, and he must realize that he had said to them previously that started this chain reaction, the day will come when you boys will all bow down to me. And here they are begging him for whatever he wants to offer. He could have made a proposition that one of you is going to have to stand on top of the pyramid on your head. For 30 days, they'd have had to do it. They'd have been willing to try it anyhow. Verse 24, and he turned himself about from them, and he wept. He couldn't control his emotions anymore. The floodgate of tears just opened up. He wept. In other words, he left them alone while he wept. And then when he got his cry out, when the emotions, the traumatic experience had lessened, the pressure on his heart had lessened somewhat, his emotional heart, then he went back to his brothers. Verse 24, and he turned himself about from them and wept and returned to them again and communed with them and took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. He took Simeon. Simeon, because of his cruel nature, was evidently the one most responsible for Joseph's sufferings. Evidently, Simeon had been the ringleader in the band of brothers that had come up with the scheme, let's throw him in the well. Or, let's sell him. Let's sell him to the camel caravan. Let's get rid of him. He's just a young kid. He's always going to cause trouble in the family. And get rid of him. We don't have to give him part of the inheritance. Let's just ditch him. Now Joseph has chosen Simeon and bound him before their eyes. Why did he do that? To make an impression on the other brothers and upon Jacob when they got home. Because he's going to take Simeon, bound him. He's going to throw him in the dungeon, in the prison. And he wants all these brothers, the other brothers, to see this. Because they had seen Joseph bound and given to the camel caravan. Now Joseph is having Simeon bound. So the brothers can see it. So when they go back home to relate what happened down in Egypt, they're going to have a good, strong, dramatic story to tell their dad. It's quite interesting. And they bound him before their eyes. Joseph's brethren returned to Canaan. In verses 25 through 28, then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn. He has Simeon in jail. He's going to send them back up to Canaan. They're going to go up to Canaan. They're going to see the old man. And they're going to get the boy, Benjamin, and bring him down. Verse 25, Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn and to restore every man's money into his sack. In other words, don't charge them anything. I'm giving them this corn free. Whatever we're charging per sack for corn, you put their money back in the sack. This is a free gift. Isn't that beautiful? The brother that they had tried to dispose, the brother they had sought to kill, is the very brother that's bringing them life, physical life. So they put every man's money into his sack and to give them provisions for the way, and thus did he unto them. So he's kind-hearted, sympathetic, understanding. He's not taking advantage of them really. He just put them in a position where he's squeezing the truth out of them. Sometimes that's the only way you can get the truth out of some people, is put them in the vice and did you say that? Oh, you didn't. Uh-huh. Oh, you think you did? Oh, you did. Oh, yes, I did. Oh, I thought you said you did all the time. You just squeeze them. Joseph got him in a vice, and he's gradually tightening up on him, getting the story out of him. Yeah. Verse 26, and they laded their asses with the corn and departed thence. They're glad to get out of there. So they loaded up their little beasts of burden, and they're loaded down, so they take off to Canaan. Sometime when you have a chance, look in the back of your Bible at a map down in Cairo, on all the way back up to Jerusalem in that area. It's a long, hot journey. And even if it's in the wintertime, it's still a long, miserable journey. So they're loaded with corn, so they take off. Verse 27, And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, now this was simply a resting place for the night by the side of the road, this inn. It wasn't a motel. It wasn't Holiday Inn or anything like that. It's just a wide spot in the road. Evidently, there's a stream of water there. Evidently, some palm trees or something of that nature. Maybe someone had built a lean-to with palm branches on to shade them from the sun in the daytime, keep the wind and the sand from whipping them in the evening. There's a wide place in the road. So they stopped along the way, and so they open their sacks, and they're going to get some food out for their animals. The middle of verse 27. And he espied his money. The money. I thought we gave him the money for the corn. Now what is this guy doing to us? We paid him for the corn. Now here's the money in the sack. He espied his money, verse 27, for behold, it was in the sack's mouth, or in his sack's mouth. There's a little pouch at the top of the sack, not down in the sack. There's a little pouch right at the top of the sack where the money is put, and then the corn, the grain, goes down into the sack. So he opens up, and as soon as he opens the mouth of the sack, so he sees the money before he reaches down in there for the grain. It's in the sack's mouth, verse 28, and he said unto his brethren, my money is restored. Hey, fellas, look, I got my money. What's going on? Didn't we pay that man for this corn? Look, here's my money. My money is restored, and lo, it is even in my sack. And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, what is this that God hath done unto us? They're accusing God of it. Isn't that amazing? How God gets the credit for things when seemingly they don't go right. Oh, God did that. When they have a windstorm, God did this. Every time we have a storm across the nation and any disaster of any great amount, people write me and they say, why does God kill little children and dogs and cats and so forth in these storms? Why does God do that? God gets all the blame for these things. So here they are blaming God. What is this that God hath done unto us? Joseph's act of returning money was actually a kindness on his part. And they think he's tricking them. So the boys are on their way up to Canaan, verses 25 through 28. Now we move to the sons' report to their father. In verses 29 through 35, they're going back to see Jacob. And dear old Jacob. Now he is not the finest and the most wonderful and the most honest and the most sincere and the most devout godly man ever was. He's not that kind of a man. As you have studied his life history with me in a verse-by-verse study of the book of Genesis, he was a schemer from the very beginning. Very treacherous. Stole his older brother's birthright for a mess of pottage. Remember how his mother put the skin of an animal on his arms and over his head? And he must have been a frightful sight. If you'd have come in the house and seen that in the kitchen there with a bowl of soup, you would have gone right out immediately. You would have said, what is this going on in the kitchen? Well, it's dear old Jacob under there, conniving to get something that doesn't belong to him. So now they're going back to report to Jacob, the aged father. Verses 29 through 35, and they came unto Jacob their father, unto the land of Canaan, and told him all that befell unto them, saying. So they're going to go back, report to the father, tell him all that happened. And that's going to take some time. It didn't happen in 5 minutes. It's going to take quite a bit of time to get all of that told. Verse 30, the man, this is what they said, the man who is the Lord of the land, the fellow down there who is giving out the food stamps in Egypt, The fellow who determines how much corn you get, whether you get a lot or a little bit or a medium-sized portion. The man who is the Lord of the land spake roughly to us. Oh, he was hard to deal with. Very hard. He spoke roughly to us, and he accused us of being spies. That's what it says there. And took us for spies of the country. And we said unto him in verse 31, we are true men. We're no spies. We're not spies. We be 12 brothers. King James says brethren, brothers, sons of our father. We have one father. We're 12 brothers. We're the sons of one father. One is not. This is referring to Joseph, the man, which they don't really fully comprehend. One is not, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. They're telling him what they said to the man down in Egypt. We've got a dear old aged father up in Canaan, and we got a young brother up there, and he's the apple of our aged dad's eye. And one of our brothers mysteriously disappeared. We haven't heard from him in 20 years or so. We really don't know where he is. Just sort of went away. Verse 33, and the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, they're retelling what happened. The man said unto us, hereby shall I know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. Leave one of your brothers, so forth. See, they're having to break the news to the old man. Jacob, he's going to fake a heart attack. He's going to have all kinds of problems. He's going to look like he's going to faint and get the sympathy of the boys. I can see him. Just sit down, Dad. Let's rest a moment. We'll tell you the rest of the story. So forth. And bring you your youngest brother unto me, 34. Then shall I know that ye are no spies, but that ye are true men. So will I deliver you your brother, and ye shall traffic in the land. You go up home, tell your father, bring your youngest brother back here, and when you come back with him, I'll know that you're genuine. You're not a bunch of fakes. You're not a bunch of shysters. I'll know you're really true fellows. I want you to do that. Verse 35. And it came to pass as they emptied their sacks. Now they're at home in Canaan, emptying their sacks. And it came to pass as they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. I thought they would have been excited. Said, this is a good thing. Let's don't tell anybody, and we do this again. We make lots of money this way. That's what I would have thought. But they detected something wasn't right. Because they went all the way down to Egypt to get corn. They paid for it. They get back up through the desert, empty their sacks, and lo and behold, there's the corn and their money. Something is not right. Something is going to happen. And it says they were so afraid. So we look at the sorrow of Jacob, the father, in verses 36 through 38. And Jacob, their father, said unto them. Now he's an old man. He said unto them, me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not. Now he's talking to his boys. You boys have done nothing but cause me problems all of your lives. Joseph, well, he's not. We can't find him. And Simeon is not. He's down there in jail in Egypt. They got him in prison. That's what you just got through telling me. Joseph is gone. Simeon is down in jail. Now you come back and you want Benjamin. You see, to lose 3 sons out of one household was a tremendous loss. Because in those days they didn't have Social Security, Medicare, all kinds of social assistance that we have today through various government agencies. And the only true assistance that a family had when the father became old and decrepit and couldn't work was the fact that he had sons around him. They didn't put them in nursing homes in those days because, first of all, they didn't have nursing homes. They kept the aged father and grandfather and maybe another generation right there in the compound because they had tents. And they looked after each other. And to lose 3 sons in a row, that'd be a tragedy. That'd be a financial disaster. And this is what the old father, Jacob, is saying. Joseph is gone. Simeon is down in Egypt in jail. And now, middle of verse 36, and ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. He said, I can't stand this. I can't bear this. It's too much. I can't comprehend it. Verse 37, and Reuben spake unto his father, saying, slay my 2 sons. Now, Reuben is married and he has children. Reuben is saying, because he's offering himself and his sons as a pledge for Benjamin's safe return. Because they got one brother down in Egypt. He's in the prison down there. So now Reuben steps in and he says, I will stand as security. I'll even give you my 2 boys, my 2 sons, as double security. And Reuben spake unto his father, saying, slay my 2 sons, if I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. It may be that Jacob suspected his sons of doing away with Joseph. It's possible that the old father, because he was clever, he had above average IQ. And it's possible that he suspected his sons might have been involved in a plan to do away with Joseph. So maybe Jacob suspected his sons of doing away with Joseph. Now, when Benjamin was involved with such a possible fate, he spoke out his heart and determined not to permit Benjamin to go. He couldn't bring himself to bear upon the thought of losing Benjamin. This is the young child of his old age. Something, it's like I've heard it over and over, I don't know how true it is, but I've heard that a child, especially a male child, born the first child in the family, that the mother has a feeling toward that child that she doesn't have regarding any other child. Now, I first learned that from my own mother. My mother had 2 boys, two girls. I was the firstborn. Came from my mother's womb first. My mother said it was something about you that there was nothing about that wasn't about the other children. And so here in his old age, when he's past the time of producing children, he has this young son Benjamin, and he can't bear to allow this boy to go off down to Egypt. Verse 38. And he said, my son shall not go down with you. So he's not going to allow it. So it says. And Jacob said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in the which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Why, if I allow you to take Benjamin off down to Egypt, and he dies, why, I'll just collapse. I won't be able to stand it. The traumatic experience will crush my heart, and I'll go to my grave filled with sorrow. I can't permit it. There's an aged, furred brow stooped beneath his weight, an old Jewish man having to give up his youngest boy in his clan of sons, and he can't do it. It's quite a story, the sorrow of Jacob the father. And he says there in that last verse, the middle of it, if mischief befall him by the way in the which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. He wasn't able to take it. So what he's doing, he's just putting it plain to his boys. He said, I just can't go along with you.
You will hear Dr. Estep